Hey guys, welcome to the channel. Today's project is another sequin purse. However, if you've seen the title of this video, then it should come as no surprise that this time I made it square. Because of this shape, it's relatively simple and doesn't require a pattern. I decided to use DMC Natura cotton yarn. Now this yarn is slightly on the expensive side, but then again cotton usually is. I chose cotton because it has a smoother finish and doesn't get fuzzy like acrylic yarn can. That being said, you can still use acrylic yarn if you wish. The frame I used is roughly 8.5 by 8.2 centimeters, so it wasn't as small as the coin purse, and it's also not that big. For the base, I started out with chaining stitches equal to the length of one side of the frame, and then single crocheted back up the chain. I carried on crocheting in rows until I had a square that matched or was close to the dimensions of the frame. There's no specific stitch count here, so it's always going to be relative to your tension. My 15 stitches could be the same length as your 13 or even 17 stitches, depending on how different your tension is. So instead, I'll describe the process in detail, and you can then easily adapt this to your needs without a pattern. Don't get me wrong, patterns are great and I love them, but they can also be rather restrictive. There have been times that I've tried following a pattern but simply can't match the set gauge, and so the project doesn't look like it was supposed to, or even anywhere near close to being what it was meant to be. If you're unfamiliar, gauge is essentially the scale. For example, when a pattern states that 10 single crochet or 10 double crochet should be 1 inch when measured. Now, I know my tension and it's what I'm comfortable with, but if a project has a pattern with a gauge that doesn't match my usual tension, there's a good chance that it will turn out bigger or smaller than intended. Even worse, there's a good chance that when I put that project down or come back to it at a later date, which is absolutely inevitable, I'll probably revert back to my original tension out of habit and end up with a warped project. Long-winded explanation aside, with this project, don't worry too much or focus too heavily on the number of stitches, as that will change from crocheter to crocheter. Just to be clear, I have made about 8 of these purses and counted the stitches at the end of each one, and they were all different. Not by much, mind, but different enough since they were also made with varying weights of yarn, which can also affect the gauge. Once the square was complete, I went ahead and single crocheted in the back loops only all around the perimeter while increasing the stitches at every corner. Crocheting in the back loops only creates a 90-degree turn so that the side walls can be crocheted and move vertically. Once I finished this round, I slip stitched in the first stitch and cut the yarn, leaving a tail about 2 inches long. At this point, if you place the purse frame on top of the base, it will be slightly bigger. Don't worry about this though, the sides will go up, it's just flat at this point, which makes it look bigger. If you want a slightly smaller purse, adjust your stitches so that when you reach this point, your base fits inside the dimensions of the frame instead of outside. I prefer the outside myself because it makes the purse slightly oversized, and I'll explain why later on. I chose gold and brown sequins for this one. I absolutely love this color combination since they work really well together, and in this case I wanted to create a gradient between the two colors. One regret though was not using flat sequins, as it would have made my life a whole lot easier. In my infinite wisdom, I forgot to string the sequins I needed before deciding to spend some me time and doing my nails. I 100% do not recommend this. Seriously, I nearly gave up, as what I thought would be a small loss in dexterity turned out to be rather huge. Although, as it turned out, the brown flat sequins I have are much darker and so wouldn't have blended so well. Anyway, trudging on with the cupped sequins, this is the point you would want to count how many stitches make up your base so that you can do the necessary maths required to get the number of sequins needed. Take that number and multiply it by the number of rounds you will do. I recommend between 18 to 25 rows, depending on how deep or shallow you want the purse to be. Once you have that number, you can string on all the sequins, but if you're going to do a gradient like I did, then I'd recommend doing this in sections. So after about 3 hours of pinging sequins across the room and questioning my life choices, damn you perfectly sculpted almond nails, I started to crochet the side walls. Since the sequins are worked on the wrong side, you need to turn the base around 180 degrees and continue working on the inside. Because I don't like sewing in ends, I crocheted in the neatest way possible and avoided leaving loose ends. or loose threads. I took the tail from the previous round and the tail from the new working yarn and positioned them across the next round of stitches so that I'd be working the new round on top of them, hiding them between the layers. This created a smoother finish and eliminated the need to reach for that needle. For the middle layer, I took both colours and just mixed them up. I didn't really mind if I had 3 or 4 consecutive sequins, but if you're a type A personality or have normal nails, then you can spend another 10 hours by making sure that the 2 colours are separated, but that won't necessarily be random. Humans can't do random, not entirely. A pattern always ends up persisting. However, if you do see that you've ended up with like 10 in a row or something like that, then by all means go ahead and split those up. So right here I'm showing you how I did my seamless join in more detail. I'm going to try and describe this as best as I can, as it can be a bit finicky, but it's probably better to just watch what I'm doing. Firstly, insert the crochet hook into the next stitch. Yarn over and pull through the new working yarn. Line up the 2 ends and pull them across to be held by your working yarn holding hand. This can get a little fiddly, but it's worth it, I promise. Push down the sequin for the next stitch, yarn over and pull through again to complete the stitch. You are now left in a position to sandwich those ends between the 2 layers of stitching. Crochet a few more stitches, 3 to 4 I'd say, then tie a knot. This is for extra reinforcement, but it's not totally necessary. Then carry on crocheting as normal till you have about a centimetre left of the ends. Once you get to that point, pull those loose ends towards you and crochet past them. At this point, you can just carry on and crochet over them too. Either way works. After a few stitches, you can stop and cut the loose ends. Honestly, it's so seamless, even I can't see it. I repeated the previous steps for the gold layer, stringing the sequins and crocheting till the end. Once done with the sequin round, I crochet another 2 to 3 without sequins to give a seam allowance of sorts, which I will use to sew the purse onto the frame. Again, I'd just like to point out that I couldn't find any of my seams and joins, and I looked for like 10 minutes. For the lining, I chose this black and brown floral print that I purchased in a fat quarter bundle around 5 years ago. I've had it for so long, and the haberdashery I bought it from has closed down. Well, it closed down at the beginning of this year, so I won't be able to buy that again, not from them anyway. So I cut the fabric to size that fit my bag's dimensions, stitched 2 of the sides closed, and stitched across the corners to form a triangle, and in doing so, I created a box shape. I also used a backstitch for strength. I placed the purse inside the lining and aligned the corners. After folding in the top of the lining to just above the last row of sequins, I sew the lining and the purse together. So when it finally came to the frame, I used a 0.25 nylon thread. First, I made sure to line up and pin the corners. Be very careful with this step as the pins stick out and there's plenty of opportunities to prick yourself multiple times. The pins are guides and help me to keep track of how much I need to gather or release. As you can see, the purse looked oversized at first, but it did all fit, so don't worry. All it takes is a little practice. Oh, and remember I said that I would explain why I like my purse to be a little oversized for the frame? Well, it's because of the hinge. The sequins need room to move out of the way and stack over each other without any tension. Plus, it also allows the purse to open up wider if there's just that little bit more wiggle room. Anyway, I back backstitched the frame on using the provided holes, and I was done. I love the way she turned out. My camera really doesn't do it any justice, I'm afraid, but the gradient is very subtle, and hopefully I can show that off when I take some better pictures. Thanks for watching, guys, and as always, please like, share, comment, and even consider subscribing if you like the content I create. Don't forget to hit that bell button to be notified whenever I upload a new video, and enjoy the beauty shots. See you in the next one. Bye!